Over the years, I have watched perhaps thousands of YouTube content creators who specialize in critiquing various forms of media, give their expert opinion about just about anything from comic books to movies to video games. And I have to say, like, for the most part, I do agree with their assessments. However, there's one case that I do disagree with, respectfully disagree with, and that is in the case of Forspoken. For those who don't know, Forspoken is a open world fantasy game that is a PS5 exclusive. I believe it is exclusive to the PS5. Yeah, um, and the story centers around a female protagonist named Alfred Holland. She goes by the nickname Frey, and Frey essentially starts out the game as a street thug living in New York City that commits various crimes to make a living. And the story begins with her being uh, standing before a judge, receiving sentence for committing a grand theft auto, in which case she receives 120 hours of community service. Now, that was the brief synopsis of the game. Uh, I'm going to get into the criticisms that people have of this game and why I believe that the criticisms are unjustified. Firstly, the main thing, especially when the game came out, which was a year ago, but the main criticism that people gave of the game was the dialogue. Now, I'm pretty sure plenty others are of that age of where we watched Buffy the Vampire Slayer. We watched various TV shows and movies that were written and directed by Joss Whedon. Also, if you watch all of the MCU movies like I pretty much, and I do apologize, that is my smoke detectors starting to go out. But anyway, that's the beeping you hear. However, if you watch any of the MCU movies or anything that was written by Joss Whedon or Brian Michael Bendis, and you listen to the absolute cringe that comes out of their characters' mouths that these men write and have wrote over the past 20 years at least, I find it very hard that anybody could take umbrage with anything that Frey says, or um, the van brace, that the talking van brace that she has on her arm. Joss Whedon and Brian Michael Bendis write the cringiest, most headache-inducing dialogue ever for any fictional characters. Frey Holland's dialogue and the things that she says is way below, in my opinion, of anything that you would ever hear Buffy say or the Avengers, any of those characters. The writers of the game have to convey the emotions of somebody who is experiencing either a psychotic break or somebody who has actually been transported to a mystical land that nobody knew existed until that moment. Now, the main thing that people focus on there's this one particular scene that all of the critics seem to focus on out of all of it. And that is when she first meets the first monster. First meets the first whatever. When she first meets the monster when she arrives in Athia. And she discovers that she has powers from Cuff. And she realized that she can move things with her mind. Now, people memed that entire scene. People mocked it. People ridiculed it. And I looked at it and I'm like, okay, it's corny, it's cheesy, but virtually everything that we watch on TV and in movies has some corn to it. It is cringy. I can't remember a movie where I went to where I'm like, wow, the dialogue in the TV show or in the movie, wow, that really hit. And video games, I don't think anybody ever plays video games for the dialogue. I mean, you have to really be reaching if you're going to criticize what the characters in the video game is saying. Because let's face it, we're playing video games for the action. We're playing video games for the violence. We're not really playing it because the word that, the characters is such a wordsmith, and, he and she can really, hit the comedy on all points and things of that nature. And then to segue into, it's more like a subplot of what I was originally talking about, her cursing. Well, number one, the woman comes from New York. Her character is depicted as coming from New York. Number two, she grew up in the streets. Number three, she grew up in foster care and is ex-con. So you're going to have a lot of F-bombs being dropped. You're going to have a lot of fucks and a lot of shits being said, whether in frustration or otherwise, because she's essentially a street kid. And I don't know what anybody, and it's the same people who are criticizing Claire Redfield in the Resident Evil 2 remake. Well, Claire cusses too much. Claire cusses too much in the middle of a zombie outbreak while people are being literally eaten alive by I was getting ready to say The Walking Dead, but being eaten alive by zombies. And people threw a bitch fit because Claire cussed too much. Well, I'm pretty sure it's the same people. Some of them are the same people who are criticizing Frey because, well, she used a few too many bad words. And again, the writers had needed a way to differentiate her from the Athians, which I'm surprised that they didn't write into the story the Athians asking her, what does fuck mean? What does shit mean? What do these words mean? Because they're from two different worlds, and here she is dropping the F-bomb and saying shit all the time and various other profanities, and these people have no idea of what it means. And it would have kind of been funny if I had wrote the game. It would have been probably like, her, being kind of like the asshole that she can be, probably teaching the kids, some dirty words and their parents not knowing it, something like that, something along those lines. And for all we know, that might actually be a thing that's in the game, but we don't really know because all people ever really focus on are those opening minutes of the game. And then they'll do some gameplay and then they'll be like, oh, this game is trash, and put it down. And I've actually sat, and I haven't personally played the game, but I've watched others do walkthroughs of it. And I actually watched a complete walkthrough from start to finish of the game. Really, the only glaring problem that I would have with the game, and the only glaring problem that I can really see with the game, is the ending. And spoilers for anybody who has not played the game, and probably the game has been buried so much that nobody really wants to play it. But spoilers anyway, if you haven't played it. The last hour and a half of the game is giving an exposition of her origin and how and her connection to Athia. As it turns out, Frey is the daughter of one of the Tantas, which I should get to. The Tantas are the villains of the game. There are these four women who are terrorizing the land of Athia, and they've been pretty much reduced the population of Athia down to like what the human race was in Attack on Titans. They're now this enclave of civilization that's left, and there's this cloud known as that Frey caused to break that is going over the land, and anybody who has the misfortune of coming into contact with the cloud turns them into zombies and turns them into these undead things. And the only way to really, stop them is to kill them. And Frey has to battle these undead beings and anything that's been hit by, what the people of Athia call the corruption. And she calls it the break. But getting into like the second thing that people are giving her grief about is her personality. Frey is her personality. She has this very what people would call an unlikable personality. You see this in a lot of female protagonists. However, Frey is different. That unlike many female protagonist, she has a very valid reason as to why she's angry and why she's seemingly has a chip on her shoulder, because as the story goes on, and really it really tells you, like in the beginning of the story, Frey was abandoned as a baby by her mother because she was one of the Tantas. She's her mother is the Tanta of love. Sipal, I believe, Cipal, Tanta Sipal. And she was abandoned in the Holland Tunnel. And she was raised in foster care. And the another tragic thing besides that is that she was never adopted into a family. And she spent her entire childhood in foster care. Now, I'm pretty sure if anybody hears this video, uh, there's probably people who know people who have grown up in foster care. There are probably people who have actually grown up in foster care. You can let me know in the comments, but especially if you're a female, uh, I can only imagine the nightmare of being a girl growing up in the system, growing up in the foster care system, and the host of extra horribleness that comes along with having those circumstances, and you're coming up in the system, then aging out of the system, and you don't have much of an education. You don't have an education to get a job or get a career, and so you now have to resort to a life of crime in order to sustain yourself. So now you're running with individuals in the streets who, now again, you find yourself dealing with people who are, again, sociopathic, people who are willing to use violence to achieve their goals, and people who are willing to use you for their own ends, which is no different than what you will find in the foster care system, I might add. And so then you have her getting arrested. And if you pay attention to the beginning of the game, she had been arrested 2 other times for felonies. And the only reason why she wasn't going to prison for years on end after her third is because the judge took pity on her because it was getting to be Christmas within the game. And so an individual that has had this type of background is going to develop maladaptive behaviors in order to survive the various situations that she finds herself in. As children, the things that we experience, they stay with us really for the rest of our lives. Our habits that we cultivate as children never truly leave us. They may get buried. We may try to resist them. We may try to leave them behind, but they stay with us pretty much always. And so you have an individual who is very hardened. You have an individual who has a, let's face it, she has a criminal mindset, very mercenary mindset. But the internet gaming community and those who critique this game, they expect this individual over the course of a 4-hour game in real life to break all of those lifelong habits that she has developed and become this all-loving hero. Now, she does become an all-loving hero, but she has a hard edge to her. She is rough around the edges. Individuals like her, no matter how loving they are, street people who have grown up in the streets, people who have grown up in what some people call underserved communities, even at their most loving and caring, they have an edge to them and they are rough around the edges. And they very rarely ever speak very delicately or very softly, even when they're giving you affirmation, even when they're giving you love, because they are hardened. Now, it could be that because a lot of these people playing these games don't know anything about that kind of life. They don't know anything about what it's like to be in the streets. They for damn sure don't know what it's like to be in foster care. And they don't know what it's like to go to jail and spend a lot of your life in and out of jail and going to prison. You see things and you come across people and you're forced to do things that will stay with you, and there's no getting around it. And the creators of the game, they did a good job of realistically portraying somebody who is trying their best to be better than what they are. You see the conflict within her, and you don't really see that in a lot of other female protagonists in media, especially in stories that are supposed to be quote unquote woke. Usually the female protagonist has people bowing before her like she's some type of goddess. They will never point out her flaws. Frey, at least in 2 significant points of the game, is being held accountable. And one of which it's really not even her fault, and that's when she arrives in Athia. She literally has knights with spears at her neck, getting ready to pierce her neck at the word from the High Council, whatever they're called. Is the story woke? Yes, it's woke, but it's very mildly woke, very mildly. I mean, the story opens up with the woman, for God's sakes, being arrested and being in on trial. And then she gets attacked by her former crew and is nearly killed by her former crew on two separate occasions. Now, and then there's the other part that people harp on, her saving the cat rather than saving the money. And again, I have to in her defense say she saved the cat because the cat is the only living thing that she's got that she loves and loves her back. And in her world, there's not a lot of people who love her. Her life in New York is rather accurate when you think about it. A lot of people who engage in antisocial activities like crime, stealing, dealing drugs, whatever, they engage in those activities with individuals who are of the same ethnic makeup of them, the same gender as them. They engage in the same activities, and they're working for a presumably a organized crime figure named Mr. Gigan or whatever the hell his name is. But yes, it's an all female crew that she's engaging in crime with, and because that's usually you run with like people who look like you, people who are the same gender as you. You know, and I know I'm hopping around a bit, but yeah, we get to the part where she is transported to the fantasy land of Athia and stuff. The writers cannot just, it would be disingenuous for them to just miraculously turn her into this altruistic loving hero that all of a sudden cares about these people, and she doesn't even know these people. These people are literally from a different world from what she's used to and what she sees. And over time, the walls begin to come down because in reality, that is her home. She is an Athian. She's not a New Yorker. She is an Athian, and actually she's a Tanta. And I know that people will say, well, oh, there's the trope that the power was always inside of her all along and stuff. Nobody ever says that. And that's another SJW trope that's broken, is when the female protagonist says that, oh, well, the power was within me all along. It was just other people holding me down and all that bullshit. She didn't want the power. The power was bestowed upon her. Everything that pretty much from the time that she was born were things that were done to her outside of her control, up to it and including her being transported to Athia and being forced to fighting this war that she didn't ask to be a part of. Now, where I will agree where the story fails is getting to the last hour and a half of the game. They spend literally the last part of the game doing an entire exposition dump on her backstory and who her mother is. And I also find it kind of like goofy that really, honestly, her mother and the Tantas apparently can at will travel between their world and our world. So really, her ability to travel to go back was there to be all along. It wasn't like some secret that had to be decoded. How I would have wrote the ending of the story is like Auden, the girl that rescues her from the prison that she's locked up in Athia. She's like, Frey, I thought you wanted to go home, and Frey says something, like I am home, or I found a new home, or something like that, and then the story ends, something to that effect. But they give you the option of either staying in Athia to fight the last boss, which turns out to be Cuff, by the way, or going back to New York. And again, I think that that's where the developers dropped the ball, and that's something that could be rectified with a remaster, maybe, or re-release of the game, where you tweak the ending, because the body of the game itself, if you really spend any time playing the game and looking at the features of the game, I feel that there is more potential to it than what content creators on YouTube are showing people. They're wanting to cherry pick these scenes and say, well, this scene is stupid, so therefore the game is stupid. No. How I look at it, I'm going to title the video "Forspoken is a Beautiful Story," because it's about a young woman who is lost in the world. All she's known since she's been alive is pain and being used and not having a place in the world. And now she had to leave the actual real world, or our world, and go to a different world. And now she has then found her purpose. She found where she came from. She found out actually who she is. That who she is not what the world has told her that she is. That she is a piece of trash on the street that has to commit crimes in order to survive. That she is much more than that. That she was born to be much more than that. She's then found a family. She's then found a home. And there are so many kids that are in that situation in real life that probably wish that they could find something in this world, find people in this world that value them, that love them, that they are loved, that they are valued. She's like 21 years old, and for all those 21 years, it's been nothing but darkness. And now she goes to this mystical land. She gets transported to this mystical land, and she finds that within that struggle, within that conflict, there's actually hope. Whereas in New York, there is no hope for her. There are people now who are relying on her. There are people who hold her accountable, but also at the same time, they respect her. And that's something that she only found the people who only wanted to hold her accountable, that only wanted to condemn her in New York. Now there are people who actually, that actually give a shit about her. And so, this video hasn't already gone on long enough, but those are my thoughts about Forspoken. I feel that it's gotten a bad rap. I feel that if in the next couple of years, if people would give it a second look, they might be more inclined to hopefully soften a bit on it. And maybe hopefully there could be somewhere down the line a remaster, a rework of the story that is more, I would say, neater than the original. And those are my thoughts. Bye.